BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. And hello and welcome back to Ripper Wednesday. After a long hiatus, this segment has returned. Every Wednesday on the channel, I used to do a segment about Jack the Ripper, and it was done as the Jack the Ripper report for several months, and prior to that I did suspect profile videos, as well as talking about some of the unconfirmed crimes that could possibly be linked to the Ripper, and they were the murders of Emma Smith, Martha Tabram, and even Rose Mylett. I have a standalone episode on her as well. So I would like to bring back the segment. For the first episode, I decided to make a suspect profile on Jacob Levy. Now, longtime Black Box Online Radio listeners will know that I've discussed him in several different episodes on the Jack the Ripper report, where I would talk about multiple different stories blended in together. But I really wanted to do a standalone episode on Jacob Levy, because I actually think that he is a high-ranking Jack the Ripper suspect. I made a suspect list once for Ripper Wednesday when I was trying to say, these are the top-level suspects, these are the intermediate-level suspects, and these are the low-ranking suspects. And at the top level, I put 4 people: Charles Lechmere, Aaron Kosminski, Francis Thompson, and Joseph Barnett, and I only put Jacob Levy as an intermediate mid-level suspect, but I've had somewhat of a reversal over the past few months, and I would actually move Francis Thompson down from being a top-level suspect to the intermediate level, and move Jacob Levy up to being a stronger suspect, a high-ranking suspect, and he might actually have been the Whitechapel fiend who operated in 1888. Jacob Levy was a butcher who worked in Whitechapel. He was born in 1856. It appears that the exact date of his birth is not listed, or it has not been recorded, but it's perhaps fair to say that he was around 32 years old at the time of the Ripper murders, from the Autumn of Terror, if we can call it that. And he was a regular visitor of Ladies of the Night. He contracted syphilis, and on the Jack the Ripper reports, I even learned about this stuff purely because of the Jacob Levy suspect profile explorations. There's a type of syphilis called neurosyphilis, where the patient, or the person suffering from this condition, develops schizophrenia-like symptoms, because everything that I would read about Jacob Levy was that he had syphilis, but he's also hearing voices and having like auditory hallucinations. And I was thinking, well, that doesn't sound like it's consistent with syphilis. That sounds more like schizophrenia. But yes, there is a form of syphilis called neurosyphilis, where someone can develop those types of symptoms. So you have somebody who is somewhat vengeful, or has the likelihood of being vengeful against women, who is perhaps having some sort of agenda and losing control of his mental faculties. But also, Jacob Levy was a butcher, and he is someone who would have had anatomical knowledge, someone who would have been very good with a knife, or had lots of practice with a knife, and it goes back and forth all the time. Some people insist that Jack the Ripper was a brilliant medical doctor, and other people say, no, the Ripper wouldn't have needed any medical knowledge at all to do what he did. The women who were attacked by Jack the Ripper in 1888 were butchered. I mean, we could say that. They were disemboweled. And I've even been watching some other videos, like on the Citizen Detective podcast. Dr. Lee Meller was saying that it appears that Jack the Ripper experienced some type of sexual gratification from disemboweling the women. But some women were mutilated in more vicious ways than others. Say, for example, Mary Kelly, the final victim, was mutilated in an extremely more severe manner. And Jacob Levy is actually the suspect of Pat Brown, the criminal profiler, and she has a very different type of Jack the Ripper theory. Her claim is that Jacob Levy, this butcher who was living in Whitechapel, was responsible for the murders of Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Liz Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and that's it. That's when the Ripper stops, and that the murder of Mary Kelly was actually a copycat, and it explains a particular time gap, because you have the murder of Polly Nichols on August 31st of 1888, and then you have the murder of Annie Chapman on September 8th, and then you have the double event on September 30th. So all of that is happening. The double event is the murder of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes. All of that is happening within a 1 month time frame. And then it's not until 5 weeks later to November 9th of 1888 when you have the murder of Mary Kelly. And what Pat Brown has theorized is that it was a copycat. It was someone who was trying to make a crime look like the Ripper. But the big differences are that the crime took place indoors, that Mary Kelly was mutilated in a more extreme manner, and she believes that that was done because the person was trying to act like the Ripper, but overdid it, and that it was just someone who operated in an unrelated way. They wanted to murder Mary Kelly, but they actually went too far. And I'm just going to go over to Jacob Levy's murder suspect profile page on Wikipedia, and I'm going to read this off because there's something that we can use as a type of counterbalance. Jacob Levy was born in 1856 and he died on July 29th of 1891. He was born in Aldgate and he is one of the suspects in Jack the Ripper's mystery. He followed his father's trade as a butcher. By 1888 he was living in Middlesex Street with his wife and children, which was right in the heart of Ripper territory and close to where Catherine Eddowes was murdered. Levy was a butcher with the necessary skills to remove certain organs from victims and was recording as suffering from general paralysis of the insane. His 1890 asylum records report that he feels that if he is not restrained, he will do some violence to someone. The 2009 video game Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper uses a combination of historically attested and embellished evidence to propose his candidacy. And the image that I've been using for Jacob Levy is actually taken from that game, Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper. Jacob Levy's life is featured on an episode of the podcast Bad Women: The Ripper Retold, where Jennifer Wallace, a historian of medicine and psychiatry, comments that it is unlikely a person in Levy's condition would have been able to carry out serial murders and persistently conceal having done so. Now, I know that that's the Wikipedia page that I can just read off, and anybody can find that online. It's the most easily accessible source, but I wanted to share that bit of skepticism. This guy has neurosyphilis, general paralysis of the insane, which seems like somewhat of an outdated term, but his form of syphilis, as previously stated, would cause him to have schizophrenia-like symptoms, auditory hallucinations. How would he be able to conceal that and just go about his normal life, or like what on earth could be happening? Firstly, I do appreciate the skepticism, but let's provide some counterbalance. Number one, people who have auditory hallucinations can go to great lengths to try and conceal them, and I've never experienced this stuff firsthand. But when I watch documentaries and psychology videos about people who deal with auditory hallucinations and schizophrenia, or in this case, schizophrenia-like symptoms, they go to very great lengths to hide it from other people and to just try and blend in. They could even do certain things to distract people from the fact that they're experiencing these types of schizophrenia-like symptoms. They have a very great desire to blend in with the public because they don't want people to know about what's going on. And this can there can be several different reasons for that. It's actually a combination of factors about why somebody who's experiencing these symptoms will want to hide it. But the fact of the matter is some people are very good at hiding it. Number two, it's possible, as stated, Levy was a father and family man, and he was married. It's possible that certain family members could have confined the Ripper at certain points if he was truly, truly losing awareness of his mental faculties. And sometimes people can experience episodes when their behavior becomes more outrageous and then they calm down or they settle down to a point where they can be released. This is a very big theory with countless Jack the Ripper suspects when they point out that, hey, this person went into the asylum but not until years later. How on earth were they able to conceal their mental problems? Well, it could just be that their families confined them for certain periods of time, and then they thought that they were acceptable to be released to the public. So, as far as Jacob Levy's behavior, I think that there could be some explanations that would be rather reasonable as to how someone with his mental state could have committed the crimes and returned to normalcy. But that statement that I just read off to you, I think was rather reasonable. I mean, perhaps Jack the Ripper was somewhat of a calculating individual, and he had much more awareness than previously given credit for, and we cannot rule out the possibility of multiple killers in the Ripper mystery. Even Pat Brown, who has Jacob Levy as her Jack the Ripper suspect, thinks that there were multiple killers. She thinks that there were two killers. Jacob Levy committed the first four murders, and somebody committed the murder of Mary Kelly. And I want to come back to that because I think that that's very important. And I think that that is just showing that not everyone is in complete agreement with anything in the Ripper case. I mean, let's be very honest. There are all types of disputes about were there multiple killers? Was the suspect psychotic, or was this all calculated? Was this all done by design? You will find different types of theories all up and down the spectrum. But the reasons why I said that I thought that Jacob Levy was a stronger suspect were that he would have been very good with a knife. He would have had an agenda and a reason to target women, and he lives right in the heart of Whitechapel. He would have had familiarity with the areas, how to sneak around different alleyways, partnered with kind of halfway in, halfway out experiences with his possible psychotic-like delusions. And I think that all of this stuff matches up with someone who would go on to murder at least four women. But what I said on a previous Jack the Ripper report was, it's an uphill battle to try and convince me that there were four murders attributed to Jack the Ripper and the murder of Mary Kelly was a copycat. I mean, it's an uphill battle because that could also just be explained that the Ripper maybe had a personal reason for targeting Mary Kelly. The suspect, Joseph Barnett, whom I just brought up, was a roommate and friend of Mary Kelly, and that's the theory involving him, that he wanted to fixate on her. She was the true target, and he committed murders either to act out the fantasy of killing her over and over again, or some type of obsession with killing women because of his anger toward her, and he wanted her to be the final victim. If I can't have you, no one will. Something like that, so to speak. And there's even the more famous theory out there that she was killed because she had some type of secret connection to the royal family. And this comes back to a very lengthy video that was done by Pat Brown talking about Jack the Ripper, where she says that people don't want to look at Jacob Levy as a serious Jack the Ripper suspect because it's not an outrageous theory. It's not something like a royal conspiracy. It's just, yeah, he was a butcher in Whitechapel who had syphilis. And I have discussed this on a previous Jack the Ripper report, but I have to disagree with that completely. Think about the suspects that I've just told you were on my top level. I mean, firstly, Jacob Levy was a fishmonger, and the reason why he becomes a suspect is he knew Mary Kelly and he matches a lot of the psychological profiling. But the other two up there were Charles Lechmere. He was a cart man. He pushed carts of meat. Aaron Kosminski, maybe even the prime suspect in the Jack the Ripper cases, Aaron Kosminski, he was an unemployed barber and ultimately went on to eat food out of the gutter. That is hardly on par with any type of royal conspiracy. So I disagree with that statement completely. And also, people in the true crime world don't necessarily go gung-ho for these types of far-out conspiracy theories. In fact, most of you guys in the comments section are very skeptical, very doubtful, or they don't even want to hear some type of twisted conspiracy that's involving royal powers, so to speak, because they're just going to be thinking, well, I don't think that's true. I think that's highly unlikely. A lot of people are focused more on the simpler suspects. But right now, I would like to turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Jacob Levy as a Jack the Ripper suspect? I think that he has matched a lot of the psychological characteristics that I would expect the Ripper to have had. I think that he has a motive for committing these crimes, that being revenge on women, or even women of a specific profession, but most likely just women in general. And a lot of these psychological profilers really say that about Jack the Ripper. They think that the Ripper just had animosity toward women. I think that he also has the deteriorated mental state, he can be placed in the area, unlike some other Jack the Ripper suspects. And, I mean, as a butcher, this would have been something that I think would not be completely out of range for Jacob Levy. And what do you think about Jacob Levy as a Jack the Ripper suspect? You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. And one more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe. But I did tell you something at the beginning of this episode, and that was that I moved Francis Thompson down to a lower tier and Jacob Levy up to a higher tier as a Jack the Ripper suspect. Francis Thompson is the suspect of multiple researchers, one of which is Richard Patterson, the author of Jack the Ripper, The Works of Francis Thompson. And when I first heard his presentation about Francis Thompson as a Ripper suspect, I was very skeptical. I didn't quite know where he was going with it. Then the more I listened to him, I began to fall under his spell, so to speak. And I think the reasons why were that he is very passionate about Francis Thompson being Jack the Ripper. He is very articulate when he's discussing the life of Francis Thompson, and he doesn't give off any of the con man vibes, or he doesn't present himself as someone who is completely far out. He sounds very level-headed, and I do think that Richard Patterson is an honest person, and I think that he is someone who is a genuine believer in everything that he's saying, and he's also an intelligent person who has really researched the life of Francis Thompson and found lots of explanations about how and why this person could have been Jack the Ripper. But the more I began to think about things, I came down from the cloud a little bit, and I realized that a lot of it is speculation, where somebody like Jacob Levy does have some hard facts that he can be placed in the area. He had the mental health issues that I was talking about. Those are more established points. And one thing that I'll expand upon in a future episode is we're going to talk about speculation. It's possible that Jacob Levy was witnessed committing one of the crimes, if, by one of his relatives, and that relative covered for him. I didn't want to talk about that too much because I wanted to focus on the harder pieces of evidence connected to the hypothesis, as opposed to just some far-out guesswork. And the final thing that I will share with you in conclusion is, I have a donation page for the show at BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88. And normally, you can use that website to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. But I know some people that just lost their home in a house fire, and there is a GoFundMe page that is set up for them. And if anybody makes a donation this week, 100% of your funds will go to that GoFundMe page, and that will be for this week here. But, I mean, just in case anyone wants to help contribute, it's going to a different cause, but I invite you to click on the link in the description box, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxnid88. Other than that, anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram, and I'll see you over there. Until next time.